Greetings, one and all, once again, to Exploring Arda, a Tolkien-centered podcast, where I am your host, Jackson, and together we will be exploring, as the name mentions, a lot of Tolkien's other works than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So we started with Silmarillion, then we went on to Smith of Wood and Major, and now we're finally finishing Farmer Giles of Ham. And I have the 50th edition version. I already said edition, so. Also, if you guys will be hearing anything else in the background, it's because I have my cat Toby with me right now. He was crying from last episode, as you can tell because I have the same shirt on. He was crying to be let inside the room, so if you hear any extra noise or little chirps or meows, that's because Toby's with me. And it's only fitting because, hey, I mean, instead of Garm the dog, it's Toby the cat. So I mean, like, he's my guy. Except I don't do any of the things that Farmer Giles does to his dog, because that would be terrible. So yeah, so now we finally get to the ending of the book. I thought that I was gonna finish it last time, but it was a lot, I guess, of reading, like more than usual, because a lot of these books that I have is that they have a lot of illustrations in them as well. So a lot of, I mean, I don't think it's like always from Tolkien himself, but other renditions, I suppose, other artists. And so a lot of his short stories have that. There was a lot of reading last time, so it was like a full, like, Silmarillion chapter. So, but now we finally get to the ending, the actual ending of the book, because I want to finish this. I really, really want to finish this so that it can be done with. So we're going to go back to the story. And if you remember, Farmer Giles was pretty much challenging Chrysophalax almost, because he pretty much chased Chrysophalax down to his actual cave of treasures and the hoard of treasures, and all his plunder, pretty much. And he pretty much told Chrysophalax to pretty much don't come out empty-handed or anything less than what you need to give us, because then I will come down with Tailbiter and force you to take everything or kill you. So I think that's kind of like the gist of what he said to Chrysophalax from the last time. So now we can get into the last part. I know, last part of Farmer Giles. I actually meet it this time. So let's do this. All right, cool. Anyway, out came Chrysophalax again. Oh, come on. As soon as I started reading, and Toby interrupts me. Oh my goodness. Toby! Here he is, guys. Ah, there's Toby. Is he gonna meow? No, I don't think he's gonna meow. Probably not. Well, alright. If he jumps back into frame, I'll try to handle it. So, anyway, let's get back to the story. Alright. Out came Chrysophalax again in mighty quick time, with 20 pounds of gold and silver, and a chest of rings and necklaces and other pretty stuff. "There," said he. "Where?" said Giles. "That's not half enough, if that's what you mean, nor half of what you've got, I'll be bound." "Of course not," said the dragon, rather perturbed, to find that the gardener's wits seemed to have become brighter since the day in the village. "Of course not, but I can't bring it out all at once." "Nor at twice, I'd wager," said Giles. "In you go again, and out again double quick, or I'll give you a taste of Tailbiter." "No," said the dragon, and in he popped and out again double quick. There," said he, putting down an enormous load of gold and 2 chests of diamonds. "Now try again," said the farmer, "and try harder." "It's hard, cruel hard," said the dragon, as he went back in again. But by this time the grey mare was getting a bit anxious on her own account. "Who's going to carry all this heavy stuff alone? All this heavy stuff home, I wonder," thought she, and she gave such a long, sad look at the bags and the boxes that the farmer guessed her mind. "Never you worry, lass," said he. "We'll make the old worm do the carting." "Mercy on us," said the dragon, who overheard these words as he came out of the cave for the 3rd time with the biggest load of all, and a hoard of rich jewels like green and red fire. Sorry, got a little itch there. "Mercy on us, if I can carry all this. It will be near the death of me, and a bag more I could ever manage, not if you killed me for it." Then there is more still, is there?" said the farmer. "Yes," said the dragon, "enough to keep me respectable." He spoke near the truth, for a rare wonder, and wisely as it turned out. "If you will leave me what remains," said he very wily, "I'll be your friend forever, and I will carry all this treasure back to your honor's home, your honor's own house, and not to the king's. And I will help you to keep it. What is more," said he. Then the farmer got out a toothpick, with his left hand, and he thought very hard for a minute. Then, "Done with you," said he, showing a laudable discretion. A knight would have stood out for the whole horde and got a curse laid upon it. And as likely as not, if Giles had driven the worm to despair, he would have returned and fought in the end, Tailbiter or no Tailbiter. In which case Giles, if not slain himself, would have been obliged to slaughter his transport and leave the best part of his gains in the mountains. Well, that was the end of it. The farmer stuffed his pockets with jewels, just in case anything went wrong, and he gave the grey mare a small load to carry, and all the rest he bound on the back of Chrysophalax in boxes and bags, till he looked like a royal Pentechnicon. There you go. There was no chance of his flying, for his load was too great, and Giles had tied down his wings. "Mighty handy this rope has turned out in the end," he thought, and he remembered the parson with gratitude. "See? Rope. There you go." Now off the dragon trotted, puffing and blowing with the mare at his tail, and the farmer holding out caught a mordax, very bright and threatening. He dared try no tricks. All right, first break here, and that's what I'm saying. Rope is so important, especially on fantasy adventures. You never know what you're going to use it for. So make sure that if you ever go into this fantasy conquest thing, make sure you bring a rope. That's like one of the essential things. So, but it is still kind of funny how this farmer with a sword that he was just randomly given is now in control of a dragon, ties down his wings just to like make sure that the treasure hoard comes back like all safely and everything's there. It's just really insane, and it would be really, really like ridiculous just to see like a guy, his mare, and they're like leading a massive dragon down the mountain with treasure. That would be wild to see, but because that's what I picture in this scene. So, we'll just go back to it here. In spite of their burdens, the mare and the dragon made better speed going back than the cavalcade had made coming. For Farmer Giles was in a hurry, not the least reason being that he had little food in his bags. Also, he had no trust in Chrysophalax after his breaking of oaths so solemn and binding, and he wondered how much to get through a night without death or great loss. But before that night fell, he ran again into luck, for they overtook half a dozen of the servants and ponies that had departed in haste, and were now wandering at a loss in the wild hills. They scattered in fear and amazement, but Giles shouted after them. "Hey, lads," said he, "come back. I have a job for you, and good wages while this packet lasts." So they entered his service, being glad of a guide, and thinking that their wages might indeed come more regular now than had been usual. Then they rode on, 7 men, 6 ponies, 1 mare, and a dragon. And Giles began to feel like a lord and stuck out his chest. They halted as seldom as they could. At night, Farmer Giles roped the dragon to 4 pickets, and 1 to each leg, with 3 men to watch him in turn. But the grey mare kept half an eye open, in case the men should try any tricks on their own accord. After 3 days they were back over the borders of their own country, and their arrival caused such wonder and uproar as had seldom been seen between the 2 seas before. Oh, hold on. Toby is messing with my computer here. Hold on. There we go. Kind of adjust him a little bit. Okay, here we go. Apologies, guys. My cat. All right. In the first village that they stopped at, food and drink was showered on them for free, and half the young lads wanted to join in the procession. Giles chose out a dozen likely young fellows. He promised them good wages and bought them such amounts as he could get. He was beginning to have ideas. After resting a day, he rode on again with his new escort at his heels. They sang songs in his honor, rough and ready, but they sounded good in his ears. Some folk cheered and others laughed. It was a sight both merry and wonderful. Soon Farmer Giles took a bend southward, and steered toward his own home, and never went near the court of the king, nor sent any message. But the news of the return of Master Aegidius spread like fire from the west, and there was great astonishment and confusion, for he came hard on the heels of a royal proclamation bidding all the towns and villages to go into mourning for the fall of the brave knights in the pass of the mountains. Wherever Giles went, the mourning was cast aside, and bells were set ringing, and people thronged by the wayside, shouting and waving their caps and their scarves. But they booed the poor dragon, till he began bitterly to regret the bargain he had made. It was most humiliating for one of ancient and imperial lineage. When they got back to Ham, all the dogs barked at him scornfully, all except Garm. He had eyes, ears, and nose only for his master. Indeed, he went quite off his head and turned somersaults all along the street. Ham, of course, gave the farmer a wonderful welcome, but probably nothing pleased him more than finding the miller at a loss for a sneer and the blacksmith quite out of countenance. "This is not the end of the affair, mark my words," said he, but he would not think of anything worse to say, and hung his head gloomily. Farmer Giles, with his 6 men and his dozen likely lads, and the dragon and all, went on up the hill, and there they stayed quiet for a while. Only the parson was invited to the house. All right, quick little break here. So it's kind of funny, actually. So Farmer Giles decides to keep what he can manage, I suppose, with himself, the mayor, and the dragon, and they have this really big parade through all of these lands and villages and whatnot, and a lot of them are just cheering on Farmer Giles, like, woo, yeah, he's our hero. And then when the dragon comes on, just boo, you suck, and stuff like that. I don't know what they would say back then, but it's all downhill for good old Chrysophalax. And of course, with his his ancient and imperial lineage, it just keeps coming up like that. So this dragon is very aware of his surroundings and his experience, that he's just like, man, this is so embarrassing for me. That I'm being led by this guy and a mare and through town, and they're parading through the streets because of his defeat. Yeah, that would make a dragon really, I feel like they would make the dragon like depressed almost, I feel like. So back to the story here. So the news soon reached the capital, and forgetting the official mourning and their business as well, people gathered in the streets. There was much shouting and noise. The king was in his great house, biting his nail and tugging his beard. Between grief and rage and financial anxiety, his mood was so grim that no one dared to speak to him. But at last the noise of the town came to his ears. It did not sound like mourning or weeping. "What is all the noise about?" he demanded. "Tell the people to go indoors and mourn decently. It sounds more like a ghost fair." "The dragon has come back, lord," they answered. "What?" said the king. "Summon our knights, or what is left of them." "There is no need, lord," they answered. "With Master Aegidius behind him, the dragon is tame as tame. Or so we are informed. The news has not long come in, and reports are conflicting." "Bless our soul," said the king, looking greatly relieved. "And to think that we ordered a dirge to be sung for the fellow the day after tomorrow. Cancel it. Is there any sign of our treasure?" Reports say that there is a veritable mountain of it, lord," they answered. "When will it arrive?" said the king eagerly. "A good man, this Aegidius. Send him in to us as soon as he comes." There was some hesitation in replying to this. At last someone took courage and said, "Your pardon, lord, but we heard that the farmer has turned aside towards his own home, but doubtless he will hasten here in suitable raiment at the earliest opportunity." "Doubtless," said the king, "but confound his raiment. He has no business to go home without reporting. We are much displeased." The earliest opportunity presented itself, and passed, and so did many later ones. In fact, Farmer Giles had been back for a good week or more, and still no word or news of him came to the court. On the 10th day, the king's rage exploded. "Send for the fellow," he said, and they sent. Sorry, I kind of lost my place here again. It was a day's hard riding to Ham each way. "He will not come, lord," said a trembling messenger 2 days later. "Lightning of heaven," said the king, "command him to come on Tuesday next, or he shall be cast into prison for life." "Your pardon, lord, but he still will not come," said a truly miserable messenger, returning alone on the Tuesday. 10,000 thunders," said the king. "Take this fool to prison instead. Now send some men to fetch the churl in chains," he bellowed to those that stood by. "How many men?" they faltered. "There's a dragon and—" and Tailbiter and broomsticks and fiddlesticks, said the king. Then he ordered his white horse and summoned his knights, or what was left of them, and a company of men-at-arms, and he rode off in fiery anger. All the people ran out of their houses in surprise. But Farmer Giles had now become more than the hero of the countryside. He was the darling of the land, and folk did not cheer the knights and men-at-arms as they went by, though they still took off their hats to the king. As he drew nearer to Ham, the looks grew more sullen. In some villages the people shut their doors, and not a face could be seen. Then the king changed from hot wrath to cold anger. He had a grim look as he rode up at last to the river beyond which lay Ham and the house of the farmer. He had a mind to burn the place down, but there was Farmer Giles on the bridge, sitting on the grey mare with Tailbiter in his hand. No one else was to be seen except Garb, who was lying in the road. "Good morning, lord," said Giles, as cheerful as day, not waiting to be spoken to. The king eyed him coldly. "Your manners are unfit for our presence," said he, "but that does not excuse you from coming when sent for." "I had not thought of it, lord, and that's a fact," said Giles. "I had matters of my own to mind, and had wasted time enough on your errands." 10,000 thunders!" cried the king in a hot rage again. "To the devil with you and your insolence! No reward will you get after this, and you will be lucky if you escape hanging, and hanged you shall be, unless you beg your pardon here and now and give us back our sword." "Eh?" said Giles. I have got my reward, I reckon. Finding's keeping, and keeping's having, we say here, and I reckon Tailbiter is better with me than with your folk." Ooh, sorry, we gotta do a little fix there here. "But what are all these knights and men for, by any chance?" he asked. "If you've come on a visit, you'd be welcome with fewer, but if you want to take me away, you'll need a lot more." The king choked, and the knights went very red and looked down their noses. Some of the men-at-arms grinned, since the king's back was turned to them. "Give me my sword!" shouted the king, finding his voice but forgetting his plural. "Give us your crown," said Giles, a staggering remark, such as never before had heard in all the days of the little kingdom. "Light of heaven, seize him and bind him!" cried the king, justly enraged beyond hearing. "What do you hang back for? Seize him or slay him!" The men-at-arms strode forward. "Help, help, help!" cried Garm. Alright, so a little quick break before we pretty much end the chapter very soon. So we'll see how long this takes. So pretty much the whole thing of Giles keeping the plunder for himself, and the village of Ham, well, I think that was the land of Ham, so it's not really like, it was more than just Ham. He was just like the hero of the countryside, so he's pretty much like, yeah, I not only got the dragon to come back with some treasure, but he also literally just, he almost belongs, Chrysophalax almost belongs to Giles at this point. It's very interesting how the tides have turned at this point. It comes from like a giant to a dragon, so I'm like, wow, okay, so insane. And then the king comes in, because he's just like, okay, fine, all these messengers aren't doing their job, so I'll do it myself. He comes in all angry and pissed off, and he's just like, fine, you know what, I'll do it myself, go kill him. And that's where we're at. So interesting. It's wild. It's a wild story. All right, let's get back to it here. Just at that moment, the dragon got up from under the bridge. He had lain there concealed under the far bank deep in the river. Now he let off a terrible steam, for he had drunk many gallons of water. At once there was a thick fog, and only the red eyes of the dragon to be seen in it. "Go home, you fools," he bellowed, "or I will tear you to pieces. There are knights lying cold in the mountain pass, and soon there will be more in the river. All the king's horses and all the king's men," he roared. Then he sprang forward and struck a claw into the king's white horse, and it galloped away like the 10,000 thunders that the king mentioned so often. The other horses followed as swiftly. Some had met this dragon before and did not like the memory. The men-at-arms legged it as best they could in every direction save that of Ham. The white horse was only scratched, and he was not allowed to go far. After a while the king brought him back. He was master of his own horse at any rate, and no one can say that he was afraid of any man or dragon on the face of the earth. The fog was gone when he had got back, but so were all his knights and his men. Now things looked very different with the king all alone to talk to a stout farmer with Tailbiter and a dragon as well. But talk did no good. Farmer Giles was obstinate. He would not yield, and he would not fight, though the king challenged him to single combat there and then. "Nay, lord," said he, laughing, "go home and get cool. I don't want to hurt you, but you had best be off, or I won't be answerable for the worm. Good day." And that was the end of the Battle of the Bridge of Ham. Never a penny of all the treasure did the king get, nor any word of apologies from Farmer Giles, who was beginning to think mighty well of himself. What is more, from that day the power of the Middle Kingdom came to an end in that neighborhood. For many a mile round about men took Giles for their lord. Never a man could the king with all his titles get to ride against the rebel Aegidius, for he had become the darling of the land and the matter of song, and it was impossible to suppress all the lays that celebrated his deeds. The favorite one dealt with the meeting of the bridge in 100 mock heroic couplets. Wow, okay, so little little break here, I suppose, before I get into the very last pages. Yeah, wow, okay, so now, instead of Chrysophalax being the enemy, it is the king now, so at least that's what it seems like, that now that Farmer Giles has all of the plunder and treasure and whatnot, he's still pretty peaceful about it, and I guess he befriended Chrysophalax because now the dragon is, I guess, fearfully at his side, I suppose. But, I mean, at the same time, he's kind of taunting the knights and kind of reminding him, hey, remember what happened back in the mountains? I can do the same thing to you guys. And they're like, you're right. And they whoop, and they skedaddle. And they scatter, so naturally. So, and it's actually pretty cool that this farmer just ends up being a lord of the land pretty much in defiance of the king himself. So, very, very cool. All right, kind of like a folk hero in a way. So let's get back to it and let's finish this story. Chrysophalax remained long in Ham, much to the profit of Giles, for the man who has a tame dragon is naturally respected. He was housed in the tithe barn, I think, with the leave of the parson, and there he was guarded by the 12 likely lads. And this way arose the first of the titles of Giles, Dominus de Domito Serpente, which is in the vulgar, Lord of the Tame Worm, or shortly of Tame. As such, he was widely honored, but he still paid a nominal tribute to the king. 6 oxtails and a pint of bitter, delivered on Saint Matthias's day, that being the date of the meeting on the bridge. Before long, however, he advanced the Lord to Earl, and the belt of the Earl of Tame was indeed of great length. After some years he became Prince Julius Aegidius, and the tribute ceased. For Giles, being fabulously rich, had built himself a hall of great magnificence, and gathered great strength of men-at-arms. Hold on. My cat is messing up my video. I figured that this was going to happen. I was getting in trouble. All right. Sorry about that. In this way... Oh, there it is. For Giles, being fabulously rich, had built himself a hall of great magnificence, had gathered great strength of men-at-arms. Very bright and gay they were, and for their gear was the best that money could buy. Each of the 12 likely lads became a captain. Garm had a gold collar, and while he lived roamed at his will, a proud and happy dog, insufferable to his fellows. For he expected all other dogs to accord him the respect due to the terror and splendor of his master. The grey mare passed to her day's end in peace. Wow, I don't know why I couldn't read that, and gave no hint of her reflections. In the end, Giles became a king, of course, the king of the little kingdom. He was crowned in Ham in the name of Aegidius Draconarius, but he was more often known as Old Giles Worming, for the vulgar tongue came into fashion at his court, and none of his speeches were in the book Latin. His wife made a queen of great size and majesty, and she kept a tight hand on the household accounts. There was no getting around Queen Agatha, at least it was a long walk. Thus Giles became at length old and venerable, and had a white beard down to his knees, in a very respectable court, in which merit was often rewarded, and an entirely new order of knighthood. There were the Worm Wardens, and a dragon was their ensign, and the 12 likely lads were the senior members. It must be admitted that Giles owned his rise in a large measure to luck, though he showed some wits in the use of it. But both the luck and the wits remained with him to the end of his days, to the great benefit of his friends and his neighbors. He rewarded the parson very handsomely, and even the blacksmith and the miller had their bit, for Giles could afford to be generous. But after he became king, he issued a strong law against unpleasant prophecy and made milling a royal monopoly. The blacksmith changed to the trade of an undertaker. Wow! And the miller became an obsequious servant of the crown. The parson became a bishop and set up to see in the church of Ham, which was suitably enlarged. All right, so now we just got a couple more. Yeah, so a couple more pages. A little brief summary here. So Giles is now king, apparently, of all of Ham. So I'm assuming Ham just kind of becomes its own country in a way. But I think it's just because, like, the original king before fears him enough because he has a dragon, obviously. Because if you can tame a dragon, then of course you're going to have a lot of respect, as it says. So that only makes sense. So right now, it's pretty much Giles just going up and up and up and up the ladder until he becomes king, and everybody around him is just benefiting from everything, and even the people in the village that he didn't really like too much, they still get a bit of that treasure. So it's really interesting to see that. So now let's finish this. Now those who live still in the lands of the little kingdom will observe in this history the true explanation of the names that some of its towns and villages bear in our time. For the learned in such matters inform us that Ham, being made the chief town of the new realm by a natural confusion between the Lord of Ham and the Lord of Tame, became known by the latter name, which it retains to this day, for the Tame with an H is a folly without warrant. Whereas in memory of the dragon, upon whom their fame and fortune were founded, the Draconari built themselves a great house, 4 miles northwest of Tame, upon the spot where Giles and Chrysophalax first made acquaintance. That place became known throughout the kingdom as Aula Draconaria, or in the vulgar, Worming Hall, after the king's name and his standard. The face of the land has changed since that time, and kingdoms have come and gone. Woods have fallen and rivers have shifted, and only the hills remain, and they are worn down by the rain and the wind. But still that name endures, though men now call it Wunnel, or so I am told. For villages have fallen from their pride. But in the days of which this tale speaks Worminghall, it has a royal seat, and the dragon standard flew above the trees, and all things went well there and merrily, while Tailbiter was above ground. Chrysophalax begged often for his liberty, and he proved expensive to feed, since he continued to grow, as dragons will, like trees, as long as there is life in them. So it came to pass after some years, when Giles felt himself securely established, that he let the poor worm go back home. They parted with many expressions of mutual esteem, and a pact of non-aggression upon either side. In his bad heart of hearts, the dragon felt as kindly disposed towards Giles as a dragon can feel towards anyone. After all, there was Tailbiter. His life might easily have been taken, and all his hoard too. As it was, he still had a hoard of treasure at home in his cave, as indeed Giles suspected. He flew back to the mountains, slowly and laboriously, for his wings were clumsy with long disuse, and his size and his armor were greatly increased. Arriving home, he at once routed out a young dragon who had the temerity to take up residence in his cave, while Chrysophalax was away. It is said that the noise of the battle was heard throughout Venedocia. Then, with great satisfaction, he had devoured his defeated opponent. He felt better, and the scars of his humiliation were assuaged, and he slept for a long while. But at last, waking suddenly, he set off in search of the tallest and stupidest of the giants, who had started all the trouble one summer's night long before. He gave them a piece of his mind, and the poor fellow was very much crushed. "A blunderbuss, was it?" said he, scratching his head. "I thought it was horseflies." Sinis, or in the vulgar, the end. Yeah, alright. We finally got to the end, you guys. So it's a good thing that I actually did do a part 4, because that took a good half hour extra. So very, very cool. So that means, oops, sorry guys. So that means Farmer Giles of Ham is done and finished. So I'm very excited that we got another Tolkien tale out of the way. It's always really fun to end another story. So yeah, obviously Chrysophalax and Giles end up not so much friends, but more of allies, I suppose. Chrysophalax remembers that Giles will always have Tailbiter with him, and that's why I'm saying he kind of fearfully allies with him because he knows what he can do, or he can do more like what Tailbiter can do, because that has a mind of its own, which is really curious that it's the only weapon in the whole story that really has its own thing about it. Really peculiar, I suppose, when it comes to that, because I thought there might have been maybe another weapon that the king might have had, to use against Giles, but apparently, I don't know, apparently not, and he just scares him off with the dragon, which, that would make sense too. I really enjoyed the story, probably more than Smith of Wood and Major, just because the first one, Smith of Wood and Major, was more about kind of food and stuff like that. And yes, I love food, but I mean and it does have to do with fairies and fantasy and stuff like that. But this one has the thing that Tolkien likes to do is taking an ordinary guy and then put him into a superb, extraordinary event. And he's just things happen like that. And and it definitely happened with Giles in this point, where he just accidentally fends himself off from a giant and then receives this magic sword from the king, and the king's just yeah, just send him a weapon, whatever. And then it ends up being the thing that both the dragon and the king fears, because with Tailbiter, he's in control of the dragon. So, I don't know, very interesting of how the story kind of twists itself into that climax at the end, if you could call it a climax. And then all of a sudden Giles just becomes king, and he's not just the popular farmer anymore. He is the lord of the land. He's the king of the land. And I feel it was a lot of that luck, that what it was written earlier, that without the sword, he probably would have died with the knights, or he would have died originally when Garm came and warned him first about the dragon. And because the second that Chrysophalax saw Tailbiter, is just well, okay, this is not good news. And then everything was not good news for Chrysophalax ever since then. And to control a dragon would be absolutely incredible. So, yeah, I don't know. That was just kind of everything that I have to say about that. I just really love those stories of that whole thing, the ordinary person, and at the end of it, they are well respected, and their skills, even if they are by luck, they prove to be the hero of the story. It's very interesting. I also really loved seeing the villain shift almost immediately from the dragon to the king, because the king's just I need that money, and then he comes to get it, and then the dragon appears, and he's just maybe I don't need that money, but I will still hold a grudge. So that pretty much happens like that. So I think that those are my final thoughts for that. So thank you guys for listening to Farmer Giles of Ham. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and sorry that it was so long. I didn't think that it was going to be 4 parts. I thought it was going to be 3. But I try to keep my episodes under an hour normally, so try to keep up with that. So that means just be ready for more episodes. If you are subscribed, I would absolutely love that if you are, but either way, look out for new episodes, because I really, really love this project that I'm doing. And, subscribe to my channels on CastBox, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, make sure that you comment below what you enjoy about the show, or anything about Tolkien, anything that you would like to add. Anything is invited, very much, or accepted, I should say, accepted. So now, I guess, with all that being said, just stay tuned for the next episode, as I've said, and may the light of Elbereth be with you all. Farewell!